Hello, Gerald, welcome.
Well, good afternoon, Nick, and it must be that open neck shirt that you're wearing that has so aided the recovery of your listener.
We hope so. We hope so indeed, don't we? John, I'll just put to you what is probably a very inadequate hypothesis, but if we accept what the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has been saying, that we are in a pre-war phase, and we listen to what former Defence Minister James Heappey, for example, was saying about the fact that across government we don't seem to be prepared for what could be a war conflict. I'm actually wondering if we're really clear what the next shape of war would look like. What would the war space be? And my suggestion is it could be something that is completely cyber-led, artificial intelligence-led perhaps, where we get shut down by a hostile state actor that grounds all our planes, brings our cities to a halt, takes out all our power. It doesn't matter how many bunkers we have around the place with ministers in them, we'd be pretty powerless, wouldn't we?
Well, certainly, Nick, I think that Nick Bois has publicised a real concern, but that concern arises out of the fact that we have, since the end of the Cold War, since the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, we've been engaged not in defending the United Kingdom itself and our landmass from attack from either the air or from the ground or from the sea. We have been engaged in counterinsurgency operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that has required a very different posture in military and indeed political terms than what has emerged since 2014, when Vladimir Putin annexed part of Ukraine in Crimea. I think we have probably been a bit slow to react, but there's no question about it that we are reacting now. The fact is that we have been providing training to Ukrainian troops since 2014. Michael Fallon, Secretary of State for Defense at the time, put that in hand. We have provided Ukraine with the massively successful NLAW anti-tank weapon, which we provided them before the Russians invaded, so they were able to deal with that threat, which we all saw on our television screens immediately after February the 22nd in 2022. And we, of course, have led the free world, particularly Boris Johnson led the free world into recognizing the importance of our coming to the aid of Ukraine against this Russian despot. So we're reconfiguring. And I think that to reassure the public, first and foremost, we have that wonderful deterrent, the continuous at-sea deterrent, that is our Trident submarine fleet of four submarines, which are capable of inflicting massive damage on an aggressor, and that is deployed continuously at sea 24/7. So as we're sitting here on Sunday afternoons, glorious weather here in Suffolk, you down there in the studio, those guys on that Trident submarine will be protecting us and deterring our enemies, and deterrence is at the heart of this, making sure that they see the risk is too great. Also, we've got guys operating on an exercise at the moment. It's a NATO operation, Steadfast Defender. We're contributing 20,000 people to that operation. So we're sending messages to Russia, essentially, do not mess with us. The point that James Heappey raises about wider cross-government activity, I think is important. I mean, you're too young, but I grew up in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. And at that time, we had brochures, we had leaflets telling us what to do in the event of a nuclear attack on Britain. So we had civil defense, all of that. And I think that it is probably a sensible precaution now to reintroduce some of those warnings to the public, some of that guidance to the public, because the best way is, again, James Heappey mentions in his article, the best way to prevent war is to prepare for it.
Do you think, and this has been raised by a couple of people, first of all we had Baroness Bennett on, who was talking not so warmly about the nuclear deterrent, but she was talking about the local resilience, and also Philip Ingram, a former military intelligence officer, saying part of the problem is not just cross Whitehall, but actually that resilience in and around the country, bringing in local councils. If our communications got taken out, you know, we'd be very much reliant on local communications. Do you think issues like that we are across sufficiently in the event of such a threat to the UK?
Yes, I think there is a very clear recognition of what you mentioned right at the outset, Nick, which is the threat from cyber attack. So far from firing a bullet, let alone a missile, our enemies could paralyze us by taking out, for example, our banking communications. That would just paralyze the economy. We saw what happened in COVID-19. In my view, the only question is whether it was a deliberate release of that bacteria from the People's Republic of China or whether it was accidental. But look at the effect that that had on all of us. So state actors and non-state actors alike are looking at ways in which they can inflict the damage upon us without resorting to the kind of warfare that we saw typically in the First and Second World Wars. So, yes, that's absolutely right.
How confident are you, particularly when defence spending is now becoming more of an issue, I'm pleased to say, but how confident are you that we can keep ahead of, shall we say, the hostile states and their use of cyber warfare, their potential use of artificial intelligence? Are you confident enough we can defend ourselves to the point, and I'll say this in the risk of you just telling me off for being so stupid, that they could take out communications between our nuclear sub that's out there busy defending us?
I am confident, to answer your question directly. I think that a lot of effort has been put into understanding the kind of threat that you're talking about, disruption of communications and so on. When we did the pretty disastrous defence review of 2010, when we had to cut defence because of the £160 billion budget deficit we inherited from Gordon Brown, one of the things that we did do is to increase our investment in cyber. And we're fortunate in the United Kingdom, we do actually have a very intelligent population in this country, very experienced in this field. We have serious talent in our country able to deal with that. But, you know, I have a vested interest. My son-in-law is Minister for Defence Procurement, and his integrated procurement model comes into effect tomorrow. And this is designed to introduce new equipment rapidly. He's completely all over the drones market. We are shipping drones to Ukraine. We are getting feedback by the day on how those drones are performing, and that feedback is informing the manufacturers here as to how we improve the drones that we're sending to Ukraine. So we're more ahead of this game than I think James Heappey is prepared to accept. And one's bound to say, well, James, you were in government in the Ministry of Defence for 4 years, and you know, why are you saying it now you've left?
Yes, well, you would not unreasonably say, you might say that, and others would indeed. But I do also remember interviewing you probably about a year ago, and we had a discussion around the fact that actually our physical resources, not the men, the equipment, of course, was being stretched as it was being willingly and rightly sent to Ukraine to do its job. And yet you've talked about now that we're still sending out drones and equipment like that out there. Are we able to replenish it quick enough to face a possible threat in 2-3 years?
Well, some of this kit does take a long time to develop. And unless you are technologically ahead of the game, you will lose. That was apparent in the Second World War. We don't need to reinvent the wheel to understand that unless you have technological advantage, you are vulnerable. But my understanding is yes. So my son-in-law is the Minister for Defence Procurement, and I know he is completely seized of the importance of rebuilding. And indeed, he's given me one example to share with your viewers and listeners today, Nick, and that is we gave the self-propelled gun, the AS-90, to Ukraine to help them to deal with Russia. And at the same time, we have procured a new self-propelled gun called Archer from Sweden. that is coming into service. So I think the Ministry of Defence really is alert to the challenges we face, and certainly trying to replace that which we've given to Ukraine is a priority. And of course, it may need to be the case, and we need to open up manufacturing capability in the United Kingdom as well as relying on our allies.
That would be no bad thing. The calming voice of Sir Gerald Howarth, former Defence Minister with close family connections there. I'm very impressed. I think we heard the news here first on talkTV. Thank you, Gerald, for joining us.